off with the midterm and through the rest of the semester from that point. So I'll make that clear on the study guide. You'll see, oh, we're just picking up with our discussion on, kind of look back on my notes, but where we left off with the midterm. So from that point on, is that clear? Everybody okay with that? Unless you want an accumulative.
No, sir.
When is it going to be? I'm going to create a window from the first day of finals, which is always that Friday after the day of study, which is the Thursday. The last day of the semester is on that Wednesday. Can't remember the exact date. So you got Wednesday last day, Thursday study day, first day of finals on the Friday. So our final window will be open up on that Friday and probably go through to probably that next Monday. So you'll have like a window to take the final. And the reason I'm doing that is because some students want to know as quickly as they can, which is what we'll do as graders, working with my graders to make sure all the exams are graded so that if anybody needs that last little bit of time before the end of the semester to do an extra credit project or something, they can see their grade up until that point and know if they want to do any extra credit. I'm just trying to make that, as an option for you. Some of students are saying, I don't want to do an extra credit unless I kind of know what my point total is, so we'll be working to do our best on that. All right. So 1 Chronicles chapter 11 begins the focus on David. It starts with the focus of him becoming king, which is interesting. We're going to see that the chronicler is very interested in David as king. Why would you say that would be the case? Right? The Davidic covenant, the Messiah, the Messianic line that's going to come through King David and into the future, all rests on King David as king. Interestingly, now let's talk about what's not included in the section here that focuses on David as king. So if we go back to Samuel, we're going to see what the author, the historian, includes about King David. Here's what the author of Chronicles does not include about King David. Now this is in your detailed notes in the speaker notes in your PowerPoint slide, so don't try to write all this down. I'm going to move kind of quickly over this. So the chronicler does not mention Saul's attempts to kill David, except very briefly in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 1 and verse 19. You're not going to have all the details that we saw in Samuel. The chronicler passes right over the civil war between those who are loyal to Saul and to King David in 2 Samuel 2 through 4. Those whole chapters are omitted by the chronicler. Nothing about this, what we call the civil war that took place in the early stages there in David's reign. 1 Chronicles chapter 11, we see the immediate focus. Remember, I earlier said the focus that the chronicler has on all Israel. So there in chapter 11, then all Israel gathered to David at Hebron and said, Behold, we are your bone and we are your flesh. In times past, even when Saul was king, you were the one who led us out and brought us into Israel. And the Lord your God said to you, You shall shepherd my people Israel, and you shall be prince over my people Israel. And all the elders of Israel came to king at Hebron, and David made a covenant with them in Hebron before the Lord. And they anointed King David over Israel, according to the word of the Lord through Samuel. So you see that emphasis coming through. All Israel, all Israel. Now, there's also, and I've pointed this out before, in 1 Chronicles chapter 20. This is a verse that maybe you remember, if it's just a faint echo. This parallels 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1, word for word. Then it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that Joab led out the army, ravaged the land of the sons of Ammon, and came and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem, and Joab struck Rabbah and overthrew it. What comes next? Remember? Yes. if we go back to 2 Samuel chapter 11, the next verse that we read from the historian, we call him, 2 Samuel chapter 11, is verse 2. Now when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around on the top of the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance. But notice in the chronicler, the very next verse. And David took the crown of their king from his head, and he found it to weigh a talent of gold. There's selectivity. The author of Chronicles doesn't even mention anything about the adultery or the implications of David with the murder of Uriah. It's completely left out. There's no mention, another one, there's no mention of the civil war between David's sons that are in chapter 2 Samuel chapter 11 through 20. So that conflict with David's sons that happens, remember, after the sin with Bathsheba, none of that is included in the chronicler's account. What is included in the chronicler's account? Now, so I want you to see this contrast. Of course, David becoming king at Hebron. We saw that in 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. This is what's included. So the chronicler includes David's victory over the Jebusites and the establishment of Jerusalem as the capital city, verses 4 through 9 there in chapter 11. David's bringing the ark back to Jerusalem in 1 Chronicles chapters 13 through 16. All of that gets included. So that's a parallel account there. The divine promise of the everlasting kingdom. 1 Chronicles chapter 17. Every single word, we'll look at that a little bit more closely later with a little extra emphasis, but mostly following pretty much the entire Davidic covenant account to 2 Samuel 7. David's victory over his enemies. 1 Chronicles chapter 18 through 20. All of his military victories. And then finally, David's census of the people and his determination of the location of the temple. Chapter 22 and following. So, now what's interesting is what's added by the author of Chronicles. So some additional material here in 1 Chronicles chapter 12. Let's turn there. Excuse me. This is new information according to the chronicler. In chapter 12, verses 1 through 22, we have a list of men who joined David while he was fleeing Saul in the wilderness. So when Saul was fleeing in the wilderness, these are the kind of the list of the mighty men that joined him during that time. In verses 23 through 40, we also have a list of persons who joined with him at Hebron when he was made king. So this is additional material from the author of Chronicles. So we have, really, we see this stress, so we mentioned it before, on all Israel were there when David was being made king. 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 10. There we go. Right. Now these are the heads of the mighty men whom David had, who gave him support in his kingdom together with all Israel. There's the emphasis on all Israel, to make him king, according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Chapter 12, verse 23. These are the numbers of the divisions equipped for war, who came to David at Hebron to turn the kingdom of Saul to him according to the word of the Lord. So, let's see. I think that's all I want to say about that. Okay. So let's move on here. In 1 Chronicles chapter 13, David's going to return the ark. And we mentioned that this is of course, this is mentioned in the account, and according to the historian in Samuel. But it's a little different than what we read in 2 Samuel chapter 6. So let's look at a few of these details. In chapter 13, verses 1 through 5, let's have, see, Jonathan up here. Could you read 1 Chronicles chapter 13, verse 1 through 5?
David consulted with the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, with every leader. And David said to all the assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you and from the Lord our God, let us send abroad to our brothers who remain in all the lands of Israel, as well as to the priests and the Levites in the cities that have pasture lands, that they may be gathered to us. Then let us bring again the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul." All the assembly agreed to do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people.
Okay, so this first part in 1 Chronicles chapter 13, this is an example of what's not included in the details of the similar account there in 2 Samuel chapter 6 in that context, the first 5 verses there. Here in the chronicler, we see more emphasis placed on David's initiative and his efforts to rally all Israel, in contrast to Saul, where the ark is neglected. And that's what we see, the emphasis there in verse 3. "And let us bring back the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul." So David's set apart from Saul in terms of how the ark is handled. And here in verses 1 through 5, we see the reported all Israel in verse 2 and 5, and all the people. You see that in verse 4. So the emphasis on all, kind of that all Israel idea comes through in the subtle details that we read here in the chronicler's emphasis. We see the chronicler also placing emphasis on David's correct handling of the ark after the tragedy of Uzziah in chapter 13, verse 9 through 14. Why don't you keep reading there for us? Chapter 13, verse 9 through 14.
"And when they came to the threshing floor of Chidon, Uzzah put out his hand to take hold of the ark, for the oxen stumbled. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and he struck him down because he put his hand to the ark, and he died there before God. And David was angry because the Lord had broken out against Uzzah. And that place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of God that day, and he said, 'How can I bring the ark of God home to me?' So David did not take the ark home to the city of David, but took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. And the ark of God remained with the household of Obed-Edom in his house 3 months, and the Lord blessed the household of Obed-Edom and all that he had."
So it's contrasting to Saul. David's going to follow what Moses prescribes from Numbers chapter 4, verse 5 and following, where the Levites are to be the ones to carry it, that is the ark, according to the proper way that Moses had prescribed. So David is, emphasis on David. He's following through with the teaching of Moses and all of these. So another thing that's original to the chronicler is David's organization of the singers and the musicians. And we see that in chapter 15, beginning in verse 16. We won't read all of it, but you see after he organizes the Levites, David spoke to the chiefs of the Levites to appoint their relatives, the singers with instruments of music, harps, lyres, loud-sounding cymbals, to raise sounds of joy. Now, one of the things that this is an interesting parallel to other accounts that we saw when we looked at how the musicians and singers were organized by Nehemiah. Do you remember that? Nehemiah chapter 12, verses 31 through 43. When the wall was dedicated, Nehemiah organized these musicians to help lead with the Levitical priest in this celebration of singing. It's interesting, the centrality of worship that we saw with Nehemiah, that we saw with Ezra when he renewed the covenant. There was singing, there was trumpets, there was people were rejoicing, and all of those things. It's interesting. This group that came back, there's all of this. There's this similarity of emphasis that comes from Ezra, Nehemiah, and now the chronicler with regards to emphasis on those who are performing and helping and assisting with the worship of the people. So that's an interesting, and this is new information from the chronicler, not found in the accounts of Samuel and Kings. All right? 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verses 4 through 7. And here's more details with regards to the organization of singing. And he appointed some of the Levites as ministers before the ark of the Lord, even to celebrate and to thank and praise the Lord, the God of Israel. Asaph, the chief, and second to him, Zechariah. Then on all these names, they were involved in musical instruments, harps, lyres. Asaph played loud-sounding cymbals, and trumpets blew continually before the ark of the covenant of God. Then on that day, David first assigned Asaph and his relatives to give thanks to the Lord. So this is going to parallel back to Nehemiah chapter 12, verses 44 through 47. And similarly, we see this foundation that the foundation that you see. This is the well, let's look at the account in Nehemiah just to remind ourselves. Nehemiah chapter 12, verses. Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 44 through 47. There we go. There's a parallel reference here I wanted to make sure you got. Verse 44 in chapter 12 in Nehemiah. On that day, men were also appointed over the chambers for the stores, the contributions, the first fruits, tithes to gather them in from the fields of the cities, portions required by the law. The priests and Levites for Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who served, for they performed in the worship of their God and the service of purification, together with the singers and the gatekeepers, in accordance with the command of David and his son Solomon. So David and his son Solomon, as it reflects or connects to David and Solomon's foundation that they laid back in the day with regards to how they organized the worship instrumentation and the orchestra and the song leaders. The way that David and Solomon did it, that's the way the chronicler wants to make sure, and it's repeated in his history. He goes back and brings extra emphasis to that and how. So that's what I wanted you to see. And you see that verse 46, for in the days of David and Asaph in ancient times, so David working with Asaph. Remember, some of the Psalms were attributed to Asaph. There were leaders of the singers, songs of praise and hymns and thanksgiving to God. And so all Israel in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah gave the portion due the singers and gatekeepers as each day required, and set apart the consecrated portion of the Levites. So that's parallel emphasis that we saw in Nehemiah, and now we see the chronicler also bringing that same kind of emphasis. So whatever it was, the foundation of worship that David began and was also continued through Solomon's reign, that's the kind of worship that we want for our new covenant community. So this is the historian now bringing this encouragement back through his history. So that's interesting. And now we go back to 1 Chronicles chapter 16. Now we have a psalm that's inserted by the author of Chronicles. Right there, beginning in verse 8. You all see that? That's interesting. And that psalm, if you study it a little bit, you'll see that it's a compilation psalm. It's actually excerpts, that psalm from verse 8 all the way over to verse 36 is a compilation of Psalm 105, Psalm 96, and Psalm 106. So it's not a single original psalm. It's a compilation of 3 psalms that come from, not all of them are Davidic psalms. It's a collage of 3 psalms. So like, I'll just read part of it, verse 30 through 36. Tremble before him, all the earth. Indeed, the world is firmly established. It will not be moved. Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice, and let them say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Let the sea roar, and all it contains. Let the field exult, and all that is in it. Then the trees of the forest will sing for joy before the Lord, for he is coming. That's an emphasis for the future, to judge the earth. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His loving kindness is everlasting. Then say, save us, O God, of our salvation, and gather us and deliver us from all the nations. Gather us and deliver us from all the nations. Do you see? There's an encouragement. The eschatological future, when the king comes, what's one of the things that he's going to do? According to Isaiah chapter 2 and Micah chapter 4. What about the restoration of all of the exiles who are out there? The remnant will be brought back, right? And the restoration takes place. So that's interesting. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? So the compilation in and of itself, just the fact that the author of Chronicles, the chronicler, is compiling from 3 different psalms, you see the focus on the greatness of the Lord and the salvation of his people. This is an intentional theological intentionality here that we see. And you see how that would have been an encouraging little group of psalms for the group of returnees that's come back. They need to be encouraged. So the author of Chronicles is, let me just add another psalm to your collection. Actually, it's already been, you know the verses. He's just bringing together different songs into a unified theme. All right? So this emphasis on worship and the organization of singers and musicians, that's interesting. I just want to pause and reflect at just that simple idea of how significant worship is, right? So think of it then. Here's this group that's come back. They've been having church for a while, and the focus and the encouragement continues to be, let's just keep coming together and worship. Because the worship focuses us on the future. It reminds us of who God is. It takes the attention off of our immediate pressures and the things that are going on in our workaday world. It aligns us the way that we need to be with good theology and what's true about our future and our current situation. All of this was true for them, and this ought to encourage us, all you worship leaders out there. There's a nice little leaping off point here to encourage your choir if they're a little discouraged. All right? Now, let's focus on the Davidic covenant, because now we move ahead to 1 Chronicles chapter 17. Of course, this would not have been excluded by the author of Chronicles for obvious reasons. This is going to be the heartbeat of why we're holding on to the present moment and looking ahead to the future. But there's some interesting, subtle emphases that come into the parallel accounts between 2 Samuel chapter 7 and 1 Chronicles chapter 17. I just want to focus on a couple of them. The chronicler will make a significant change for emphasis. The chronicler focuses on Solomon more than the historian in 2 Samuel chapter 7. So the author of Samuel, the historian, puts emphasis on the fact that it's David's house and David's kingdom and throne that will be established forever. However, the chronicle seems to put a little more emphasis that it is David's son who will be established in the Lord's house and be established in the Lord's kingdom and on his throne forever. Just subtleties in that parallel passage, verse 16 in 2 Samuel 7 and verse 14 in chapter 17. And your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever. So there's the your, David. But I will settle him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. It's the subtle difference there. It's kind of, you'd read right over it if you weren't looking close. All right? Now, this is going to parallel, and it's, scholars debate this and talk about it, but chapter, let's see here. Yeah, this is going to parallel the chronicler's emphasis on the conditionality. He's going to add a little extra emphasis on the conditionality of the Davidic covenant. Let's see, 1 Chronicles chapter, we'll jump ahead here a little bit, chapter 28. 1 Chronicles chapter 28. We'll look at this in a little bit, and I'm jumping ahead here, but the end of 1 Chronicles is going to have some extra material that's not found in Samuel Kings with regards to King David and his involvement in, you might say, the preparation for the temple. He doesn't build the temple, but the chronicler gives a lot of extra information about David and his involvement in preparing, kind of the precursor to getting the temple activity started with Solomon. And here's King David in chapter 28, verse 2 through 10. Then David rose to his feet. And what I want you to see here is the emphasis that comes from David on the emphasis on faithfulness and fidelity. In other words, the conditionality of what needs to come. David says in verse 2, "Listen to me, my brethren and my people. I had intended to build a permanent home for the ark of the covenant of the Lord and for the footstool of our God, so I had made preparations to build it. But God said to me, you shall not build a house for my name, because you are a man of war and have shed blood." David was involved in winning battles and preparing this time so that there would be relative times of peace so that Solomon could come in and build the temple. Verse 4, "Yet the Lord, the God of Israel, chose me from all the house of my father to be king over Israel forever. For he's chosen, just as he chose Judah to be my leader, and in my house of Judah, my father's house, and among the sons of my father, he took pleasure in me to make me king over all Israel and all my sons." So, let's see, do I want to read this whole thing down through? So it's his reflection here again on the Davidic covenant. But notice in verse 9, I just jumped down to verse 9. "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts. Now here's the conditionality, if you seek him, he will let you find him, but if you forsake him, he will reject you forever. Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house for the sanctuary. Be courageous and act." So this conditionality comes from